The grid, though, forming up, and we are just seconds away now from the start of this race. One warm-up lap and away they go. And this, perhaps, John, is where the drivers will find out what this rain since the warm-up session has done to the track surface.
Well, it will certainly have cleaned a little bit of the rubber off that track surface, but of course we've got a fairly long run from the start grid up to this first left-hand curva de Senna. Ayrton Senna on the pole, alongside him the two Williams of Mansell and Patrese in second, Mansell third, and Gerhard Berger fourth. Nigel Mansell, I talked to him this morning, and he had some very interesting things to say, because the gearbox on the Williams car, the car that was so competitive in Phoenix 2 weeks ago, they're not 100% confident, and in fact Mansell tried two different gearbox setups, and by that what he has done is made one car into a 5-speeder and the other car the regular 6-speed. The idea of going with 5 speeds is it is less difficult, less towering on the gearbox. It is the 5th and 6th gear plane that is the area where they had problems in Phoenix. So he's tried to eliminate one of those two gears, and that might mean that Mansell may not be quite so quick off the start, but we don't know which one he's gone with. That's something we will only know in the course of the race.
Well, Mansell certainly surprised everybody with that warm-up time. We were watching that, and you said this morning that Honda McLaren looked as if they might be under serious attack.
Yes, I spoke to Ron Dennis also, and Ron was his normal calm self, not giving anything away. His quote was, "It won't be a problem," and by that I assume he means he thinks his man Ayrton Senna is going to win his first Brazilian Grand Prix. We've got 71 laps in which to find out, and I think for Senna every one of those laps is going to be as difficult as that marvellous qualifying lap he did on Saturday afternoon.
Well, Ron Dennis saying it won't be a problem. Just a day ago, less than 24 hours ago, he said to us that confidence is a weakness, and we shall now see the truth of that, or otherwise, proved before our very eyes.
Yes, all the cars are now almost complete this final parade lap. Here we are in car with, this is Alan Prost, we think, these in-car cameras.
Senna then rolling up towards his position at the front of the grid, as we say, the 54th of his career, and that really is a truly remarkable achievement for any driver. Alongside him, though, not his arch rival Alain Prost, but another arch rival, I suppose, Nigel Mansell. And the car's starting, as we see, on slick tyres. You were saying even when there was still some drizzle in the air that if you were a team manager you'd start on slicks.
Yes, because here in Brazil, although we've had very changeable weather, we've had rain, we've had this very miserly sort of rain as well, here at Interlagos the track does dry quite quickly. The ambient temperature is quite high, so with 26 cars going round at the same time, you're going to get a dry line appearing very quickly indeed. And of course the people that went out in wet tyres 20 minutes ago came straight back in and put on slicks. Ayrton Senna in fact didn't even bother with the wet tyres. He knows the place sufficiently well to know what is the right decision to make, and he is on his pole position in his home Grand Prix on slick Goodyear tyres, C compound. All the Goodyear runners are on that C compound.
Well, Ayrton Senna does live here. He ought to know what the weather has in store for him. The grid virtually complete, and when it is, we'll get that 5-second board that warns the drivers at the front that the red light and then the green is imminent, and that prevents them dragging their clutches. The grandstand's coming to their feet now. Their hero is in pole position. Ayrton Senna is about to make the start of the Brazilian Grand Prix. The red light is on. There goes the green. Ayrton Senna drags it away. He makes the clean start, and he's in front of Nigel Mansell. Ayrton Senna takes the lead.
And it's a great start from Ayrton Senna. The two Williams, second and third. Ferraris, we think it's Alesi, Berger. One of the Benettons diving through, Prost behind it. Everybody appearing to get through. Somebody on the grass on the outside. Oh, look at that, all over the place. So I think Emanuele Pirro in his Dallara. But in the meantime, Senna sprinted to the first corner, took the initiative. And Prost under pressure from one of the two Tyrrell Hondas. But in the meantime, Senna, dream start from Ayrton Senna. This is what he wanted. It'll be very difficult indeed for anybody. And there we see poor Tarquini in his AGS didn't get very far at all. His race finished, not even a lap completed.
Well, Stefan Johansson, of course, didn't qualify, so that's the AGS weekend over and done with, almost on the green light.
Yes, and of course a lot of people are saying that the AGS may not get much further than Brazil in their Grand Prix season, under tremendous financial pressure. So a very sad start to the Brazilian Grand Prix for AGS.
Senna streaks away into the lead, pursued by Nigel Mansell. I was watching the start and I saw a trail of smoke which may just have been wheel spin, but it looked as if it went on an awful long time for Gerhard Berger. Seems to have settled down now.
Yes, it was one thing that for Nigel Mansell, if he was running that higher first gear in a 5-speed layout, of course, he'd really have to give it mega revs to get those wheels to spin. But Senna across the line first, Mansell second, and Mansell's taken a little bit of time out of Senna on that first lap.
Senna going through what is called Senna's S, and this circuit strings several corners together in a sequence. There are 2 long straights with plenty of overtaking opportunities and plenty of sequences which present difficulties as far as overtaking is concerned, but Senna has the measure of them from qualifying, does he not?
Yes, he does, and of course leading his home Grand Prix with Nigel Mansell presently just under a second behind him, but he's able to really dictate very much the pace he wants to run at, and in spite of Mansell maybe being able to run quicker, as we saw in this morning's warm-up, being behind a car and overtaking it is quite a different issue. And on this Interlagos circuit there really are not that many opportunities, viable opportunities to overtake, and certainly not somebody like Ayrton Senna.
Well, viable opportunities for overtaking have been something of an issue in Grand Prix racing over the past couple of seasons, and there are now some fairly heavy penalties for people who take a chance where perhaps no such chance really exists.
Well, we have yet to see just quite how stewards of a race meeting are going to deal with drivers who come in to disrepute. That's something that I think all the drivers are very anxious to know as well, because until somebody actually puts their foot out of line, no one's going to know quite how far they can go in the first place. But Senna's in fact increased his lead on the second lap over Nigel Mansell. It's now almost 1.5 seconds. Riccardo Patrese a further 2.5 seconds behind Mansell, Alesi 4th, Berger 5th, Pique 6th, and Alain Prost all the way down in 7th. Now don't write Prost off at this stage of the race. Alain Prost is probably quite comfortable there. Remember, he is the man who won the race last year.
Alain Prost has, as we've said, been the quiet man of qualifying over the course of this weekend, and he suddenly emerged as not so quiet in the morning warm-up. And as you say, I think there's always a background.
Senna will be keen, if he can, to try and get a bit of space between himself and Mansell, but that may not be easy. Mansell will certainly have other ideas about it. The Williams really went very much as we've been expecting it to go. New car, not quite so good in Phoenix, but went very well here indeed, and seems to be fully competitive.
Well, you can see that, because look at the gap between Nigel Mansell in second position, and here is Riccardo Patrese third, pulling away from Alesi fourth, Berger fifth, Pique in sixth position, Prost is seventh, Modena there is eighth, and in ninth position was one of the Leighton House cars. I would suspect it to be Maurizio Gugelmin, notwithstanding the fact that the unfortunate Brazilian had a fire extinguisher explode in the car during the warm-up this morning and badly burned his back and legs, but he's been passed to drive by Professor Sid Watkins, who is FISA's resident doctor at all the Grand Prix. And of course Gugelmin will have an enormous amount of adrenaline flowing through his veins in Brazil in front of his home crowd, and that will wipe out a lot of the pain. But now still on lap 4 in this 71 lap race, as we ride with Ayrton Senna, we are riding with the leader in the new McLaren MP4/6 with the Honda V12 engine, also new for 1991.
Yes, it's a tremendous shot at the twisty infield of the circuit. The road rises and falls, which makes it more interesting. The road falling away now, car going a bit light, and then down the hill. And Mansell seems to be tracking Senna pretty comfortably at the moment. The gap settled at about a second, and I'm quite sure that Mansell won't be in any hurry to attack Senna just yet, as so long as they're pulling away from the others, he'll be happy to sit for a few laps behind Senna and let the gap to third place open if it will. If not, then I would think he will bring some pressure to bear on Senna. But for the time being, he's very comfortable. He can sit and watch Senna, let Senna make the pace, and wait while they pull away from the others, which they're doing.
Yes, Ayrton Senna, there he goes. And Nigel Mansell very much needs points, because every point in the World Championship counts this year. That fastest lap, 1:21.4, compares with the lap record last year by Gerhard Berger, 1:19.9. But of course it's very early in the race at the present moment. We're on lap 5 at the moment, and there's still a lot of fuel to be consumed before the speeds start to rise as the weight of the car goes down. But on this 5th lap, no change at the front. Ayrton Senna, clear track in front of him. Nigel Mansell, you can see the Williams there in 2nd position, comfortably, as James says, pacing himself. Then it's Riccardo Patrese, and Nigel Mansell, I was saying earlier, like Patrese, desperately needs points. Every one counts in the World Championship this year, unlike previous years when the best 11 out of the 16 races have counted, and that means to say that reliability is the name of the game. And so that gives the edge at the present moment to Senna and Prost, who finished 1st and 2nd at Phoenix. Senna getting 10 points as opposed to 9 last year, and that's going to make a difference too. So Mansell there in 2nd position as Senna exits the left-hander on this superb circuit. Brazil spent an enormous amount of money last year to make this circuit one fit for their hero Senna to win at. Well, he didn't win. Last year he was in this sort of situation, leading, but leading even more comfortably, when he came up to lap the Japanese driver Satoru Nakajima in the Tyrrell. Nakajima hit a dusty part of the circuit, lost traction at the front, and his car slid into Ayrton Senna, who had to come into the pits for a new nose cone and drop down to 3rd position. He won't make that mistake again this year. So we're looking down from the helicopter now, race order on lap 6, coming up to the 1/10th distance lap already in the 1991 Brazilian Grand Prix. Ayrton Senna leading, Nigel Mansell Williams 2nd, Riccardo Patrese 3rd, there is Alesi 4th, Berger in the McLaren in 5th position, 6th is Pique, being caught by Alain Prost in 7th position, 8th is Modena, and in 9th position it's Maurizio Gugelmin.
Yes, and I think Prost will have played himself in as he likes to, got his tyres scrubbed in nicely, looked after them, not heated them, and he's beginning to pressure Nelson Pique, and I'm sure he'll be looking for a way round Pique fairly soon, because the leaders are beginning to get away, Senna and Mansell, and Senna has opened up a little bit more space on Mansell than he's had before. But we'll have to watch him for a few more laps to see whether that's Senna's trying to actually edging away from Mansell, or Mansell just taking it easy and comfortably.
McLaren really are an incredible organisation, because for year after year they have appeared at the first race of the year with a car that's only just been completed, when all the other teams have been testing all through the winter and setting times which impress everybody. And then McLaren go out and win the first race. They haven't always done it, but they did it this year at Phoenix very convincingly indeed. Now we're with the McLaren, with the Ferrari of Alain Prost, and ahead you can see Nelson Pique. So now, from the driving seat, you can study the relative performance of the V12 Ferrari that you're riding with and the V8 Ford-powered Benetton of 3 times world champion Brazilian Nelson Pique. And that's the moving dot in front of you. 6th position. Prost is well down compared with where I expected him to be, having been 2nd fastest in the warm-up this morning, and you saw them go through the picture there. And here's the McLaren. It's the McLaren of Gerhard Berger. Still not completely happy. We talked about this at Phoenix. But Gerhard Berger, who had a great deal of discomfort in last year's car, has got some discomfort in this year's car because his feet don't fit.
Yes, but in fact McLaren have done a fair bit of work on the pedals after Phoenix, making new pedals for Berger to try and get them in, and he's still trying to get comfier. In the meantime, Senna leads. Prost is certainly starting to look, and here we are again riding with Alain Prost. That's Piquet's Benetton ahead, and certainly the Ford engine seems to be getting him away out of the corners very effectively indeed. But of course you have to remember that it looks rather greater the advantage than it really is. First of all, our camera on the car tends to foreshorten the picture a bit, so it exaggerates the length of the shot, but the other thing is, most importantly, these cars have so much acceleration, so much power. The driver in front must inevitably put the power on first, otherwise the man behind hits him up the back, and that means that he gets the drop on you. But Prost is closer now than he's been at any other stage in the race, and he'll be looking to go through the complex here and try and get a tow and challenge Pique on the main straight, which they're about to come onto. Now, Prost needs to be closer than he is to have a go on the straight. Not close enough this time. He may be better to try and do him on the uphill straight past the pits and into turn one. Well, he's got half a lap now of the twisty section to try and get right onto Nelson Piquet's gearbox. But of course that is made more difficult by the aerodynamic, or by the turbulence of the air in front, created by Piquet's car. The closer you get to the car in front, the less grip you have, because you're running in a partial vacuum, so your own aerodynamic surfaces don't work properly, and you see the problem here for Prost. Now he needs really to get within a couple of car lengths as they start the uphill climb onto the main straight. So now shooting down the hill and then sharply onto the brakes, and this is the left-hander onto the main straight. Now Prost closer this time than before, as we look at Senna now going through turns 1 and 2, and we really want to see Prost and Pique on the straight. Mansell still holding on, dropped back a little bit, but looking relatively comfortable. He's 2.5 seconds now behind Senna, and if he's going to stay with Senna, he won't want that gap to get any bigger, and he'll need to settle down now and try and stay. Senna is obviously at this stage driving at absolute 10/10 because he's trying to break Mansell. He wants to demoralise him and keep that gap just growing a little bit. He needs the cushion.
The thing that's of interest to me, and we are on lap 10, which is 1/7 distance, the thing that's of interest to me with the Leighton house in the pits, I can't see whether it's Gugelmin in the pits. I don't know what the problem is, obviously, but I was saying the thing that's of interest to me at 1/7 distance is the way that Mansell in the Renault-powered Williams is holding on to the V12 Honda-powered McLaren. Now we're with Prost again, and you can see that there is Pique in front.
Yes, and Prost did not get... we've just seen that was Gugelmin in the pits, and obviously the burns from the fire extinguisher problem this morning were too great because he had to be lifted out of the car, and that looked like a retirement through malfunction of the driver, but of course malfunction through injury, and that'll be a great disappointment to Maurizio Gugelmin. Obviously keen to do well in front of his home crowd, and that's a very unlucky way to be put out of the race. Now
está mais perto de Patrese, está sensivelmente à mesma distância. Gerhard Berger, ele está entre Alesi e Piquet. Ferrari número 28, e enquanto o McLaren de Senna se distancia dos seus perseguidores, exceto Mansell, de facto Gerhard Berger não consegue aproximar-se de Jean Alesi. Era 1.2 na volta anterior, 1.2 nesta volta, portanto tudo igual.
Senna coming through to complete his 11th lap, so Senna leads. There is Mansell in the Williams Renault in second position, a long way ahead of Riccardo Patrese third, who has got just behind him Gerhard Berger fourth.
Yeah, well, what is important for Mansell? He's holding Senna at the moment, and it's essential that he holds him all the way to half distance, because we are expecting pit stops in this race, certainly from the Goodyear tyre runners. It's been a bit of a messy weekend with so much wet weather for the tyre testing, but it's generally reckoned the teams are expecting to have to stop, and Mansell will certainly want to be within a second or two of Senna for the pit stop, because of course if that is one of the easiest ways in the business to pass, as far as the driver is concerned. Of course that's up to the pit crew when you make your stop, and the driver of course making a good entry and exit to the pits, but he'll be looking to stay within a second or two of Senna, even if he can't challenge him for the lead on the track in the first half of the race, and then to try and get the drop on him with the tyre change.
Lap 12 out of 71. Ayrton Senna leading Nigel Mansell by 2.3 seconds. Riccardo Patrese is 4.3 seconds behind Mansell in third place. Fourth is Alesi, fifth is Berger, sixth is Nelson Piquet, seventh is Alain Prost, eighth is Stefano Modena, in ninth position, excellent, Bertrand Gachot in the Jordan, in 10th position it is Andrea De Cesaris in the second Jordan. This is the first race that both cars have got into, and then behind him it is Roberto Moreno in the Benetton, leading Eric Bernard's Lola, and then it is Morbidelli, Gianni Morbidelli, and in 14th place it is Ivan Capelli. And as you can see, Senna is speeding up, 1 minute 23.86, 1 minute 21.386, and as you see for yourselves, that is very, very quick indeed, but still well off his lap record because of the fuel load. And still Nigel Mansell is calmly hanging on there. It looks to me as though Nigel is really not challenging at the moment. James has said earlier on that Mansell will be watching Ayrton Senna and studying form, and I reckon he's still doing the same thing.
Yes, I mean, unless he's got a big advantage, there's a lot of effort involved in trying to pass somebody when the cars are pretty equally matched. And I'm quite sure that even if Mansell feels that he can go a little bit quicker than Senna, there will be no need at this stage of the race to pass. There's one of the Jordans, and how well they've done.
It's Bertrand Gachot on the right, the Belgian in the Ford-powered Jordan. And behind him you can see it is Roberto Moreno, the Brazilian. There's a lot of Brazilians in this race, of course. Moreno, Ayrton Senna, Nelson Piquet, Mauricio Gugelmin started it, but sadly has had to retire because of those fire extinguisher burns. Gabriele Tarquini is out of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Aguri Suzuki didn't even start. You remember he was wheeled away from the grid and has not started the race. And now Senna is coming up to start to lap people. It's one, and that's Nakajima out, Satoru Nakajima out. You can see the Japanese there, he's obviously not at all happy. He's saying, no, don't bother, I'm out of the race. While he's not allowed to be push-started. And Ayrton Senna has lapped Martin Brundle. And by the way, Martin Brundle and Mark Blundell are both running now well down the field. They are last and last but one at the present moment. But it's early days yet. They're looking forward, like several other teams, notably the Footwork X-Arrows team, for their new cars, which they're going to have at San Marino. Senna comes through to complete lap 14, and Mansell is coming up now. Lap 14, Ayrton Senna, 2 seconds now ahead of Mansell.
Mansell, 2 seconds is a very comfortable distance to sit behind another driver. You've got him well in sight. He speeds up. You can keep it covered. And really, as I was saying earlier, the physical effort of getting close behind Senna and trying to line up an overtaking manoeuvre at this stage of the race is really counterproductive from Mansell's point of view. And I'm sure that he's happy just to hold the gap, hold close to Senna, and stay there at this stage. So conserve his strength for the second half of the race when the real fighting will start.
There's a real fight behind. Understandably, the Brazilian producer is favouring the Brazilian hero, Ayrton Senna, who's leading the race. But Alain Prost is again right up with Nelson Piquet, who is in 6th position. So Prost 7th, Piquet 6th. In 5th position, it's Gerhard Berger. 4th is Alesi. 3rd and 2nd are the two Williams, and of course Ayrton Senna is still leading the Brazilian Grand Prix on lap 15 out of 71. No signs of the rain that we had feared might come. There is cloud overhead and heavy cloud at that, but hopefully the rain is going to hold off. And Senna has now lapped Mark Blundell in the second of the Brabham Yamahas. And you can see sparks striking. The ride height here of the cars in Brazil is, as it was at Phoenix, very low indeed, in order to enable the aerodynamics of the car really to work. Well, Mansell has reduced that lead from 2.3 to 1.9. Not all that significant, but just look how much Senna and Mansell are ahead of Riccardo Patrese, who went so well at Phoenix and went so well in practice here at Interlagos. A 10-second gap now, and Mansell is definitely challenging now. That is less than 2 seconds.
Yes, he's a little bit closer, but I think the lead will vary now because they're in amongst the traffic. Back markers interfering. Sometimes the driver behind gains a bit, sometimes he loses a bit. But I'm sure Mansell will keep relaxed for the time being and try and make his move when they go for the tyre stops. The lead down to 1.3 seconds now, but that Senna lost a little bit in the traffic. Mansell, though, if he gets very close, courtesy of the traffic, will of course be looking for an opportunist opening. Now that is important, and what he should be doing now as they get in amongst the back markers is to try and keep as close as possible to Senna, just in case Senna gets messed around by a back marker, which is always possible. And at that point he must be in position to grab the opportunity. So he will be trying to stay as close as possible.
Yeah, and there is Senna lapping somebody as he goes through, and here's a Ferrari coming in. Now, is it going to be Alesi or is it going to be Prost? Much earlier than we expected. This is lap 17. We weren't expecting anybody to come in before lap 20 at the very earliest. And here is Senna leading, and McLaren are ready for a pit stop too. So the tyres are wearing quicker than we expected.
Yes, my guess is that both teams will be calling in their number twos, so it'll be Alesi and Berger in, so that the teams can check the tyre wear. Although Alesi's running ahead of Prost on the track, Prost is very, very quick when he's got a clear run, and that will be, I'm sure, Ferrari. And Alesi will use the tyres much harder than Alain Prost, so they will be able to learn something by pulling the tyres off Berger's car and off Alesi's car that will be useful for their number ones.
What we don't know, of course, is how relatively the Williams and the McLarens wear their tyres. They're both using the same make of tyre, unlike the Benettons, but we haven't had them both going a full race distance. And Prost into the pits now. Prost into the pits from 7th position. Let's see how that time goes. Is it a good one? It was 8 seconds. Well, it took 15 seconds at Phoenix. And Senna is getting closer to Mansell, or rather the other way around.
Well, that in fact was good tactics by Alain Prost, because he was stuck behind Nelson Piquet, and now that he's on fresh rubber, he may have a clearer track behind him, so he can make time on the road, or that would certainly be the thinking involved. And if he was doing his homework, he would have checked with the Ferrari pit that the road wasn't too crowded behind. So there is Alain Prost on fresh tyres as the leaders go by, and a Leighton House parked beside the road, so that must be Capelli's car.
Yes, Capelli out, and Alain Prost rejoined in 11th place, having put on a new set of tyres. And the race order on lap 19 now out of 71. Ayrton Senna leading, and Nigel Mansell, who is a steady 2 seconds behind him. Third is still Riccardo Patrese, and there are the leaders coming towards us at this moment. In 4th position, it's still Gerhard Berger. In 4th position, I'm sorry, is Alesi. 5th is Berger. 6th is Pique, and you see a very unhappy Capelli walking back now. That means that both the Leighton House Ilmor V10 cars are out of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Gugelmin because of his burns problem, and I would imagine Capelli, I'm guessing that it was an engine problem, but one of the Ilmor V10s let go in the biggest possible way in practice. Looking down now at this really stimulating battle for the lead between an Ayrton Senna, who dominated things at Phoenix, but is certainly not dominating them here. Nigel Mansell, having decided in 1990 to retire from Ferrari, was persuaded not to for all sorts of reasons, one of them alleged to be about £6 million a year, and thankfully he's gone back to the team which gave him 13 of his 16 victories, Williams, with a new car designed by Patrick Head and Adrian Newey, a new Renault engine V10, a new semi-automatic gearbox, and it looks as though it is really working here in Brazil. Lap 20, and Mansell is giving Senna a very hard time indeed.
Do que Ayrton Senna, obviamente que tanto um como o outro vão ter que passar pela box para trocar pneus. Senna está na frente e conduz a sua corrida, enfim, suportando a pressão de Nigel Mansell, mas de qualquer maneira é ele que neste momento está no comando. Quem pode e vai certamente beneficiar caso não troque pneus são os homens, como já dissemos no início, os homens que equipam saída de Modena. É o Tyrrell, eu dizia, os homens da Tyrrell e os homens da Pirelli, dizia eu, e este é um deles. Portanto, já não há nenhum Tyrrell em pista. Há pouco foi Nakajima que se despistou, agora é Stefano Modena que abandona. Quem não tem tido um comportamento, quer em treinos, quer neste início de corrida, enfim, razoável, são, melhor dizendo, os dois, Minardi e Ferrari. O de Morbidelli ocupa a 13ª posição, o do Pierluigi Martini a 5ª, 14ª. Problemas de chassi.
Senna leads, Mansell second, Patrese third, and he is now 16 seconds behind Nigel Mansell, but holding a strong watching brief. In 4th position, it's still Alesi. 5th is still Gerhard Berger. 6th is Nelson Pique. Stefano Modena was 7th, but now that he's gone out, Bertrand Gachot has gone up into 7th place. That's a terrific performance, almost in the points. There is Modena walking in 8th position now. It's his teammate Andrea de Cesaris. So the Jordans are in 7th and 8th positions. In 9th position, it is Roberto Moreno, the second Brazilian, and Alain Prost is only in 10th place after his pit stop.
And Gachot's car's sounding a bit rough, and sounds like he's got a problem, and that really is a great shame for the Jordan team, brand new team in Grand Prix racing this year, and doing fantastically well in only their second Grand Prix. Gachot went. We're hoping that it's just an exhaust for Eddie Jordan's sake, because the engine sounds rough, but a broken exhaust makes an engine sound very rough without it actually losing much power. Now, here come the leaders. So, Senna over the line, Mansell tracking him close now. There are back markers ahead of them, and this is where Mansell wants to be as close as he possibly can to Senna. Onto the straight. 2 back markers ahead. That will be worrying Ayrton Senna. It's worrying when you've got the lead of a Grand Prix and somebody's quite close behind you, pressurising you. You see 2 back markers ahead, and that is a crisis moment. Senna will be trying to time his arrival on them on the straight, and he's diving inside, and he was spotted.
But we didn't see whether Nigel Mansell got through. No, yes, he has, and he's not only got through, but it looks to me as though he's gained a bit of time in the process. He's even closer to Ayrton Senna on lap 22. It was one of the Ligiers that they have lapped, either Thierry Boutsen or Eric Comas. And out of the race now, we have Gabriele Tarquini, Aguri Suzuki, Maurizio Gugelmin, Satoru Nakajima, Ivan Capelli, Stefano Modena. That means both the Tyrrell Honda V10s are out of the Brazilian Grand Prix, having finished an excellent 4th and 5th at Phoenix in their first race.
And Senna will be very keen to get past the slower car before he has to turn into the twisty one at the top of the circuit, but he doesn't make it, and he might just be held up a little, and this could be a chance for Mansell. Mansell has dropped back a little bit. He's not quite as close as he ought to be for this situation. Well, they get through cleanly, and Senna's got a clear run down the straight, and he'll get past on the straight.
That is Boutsen, so the other one was Comas. So Senna has now lapped both the Ligiers. First of all, Eric Comas, then Thierry Boutsen, who has won 3 Grand Prix in his career, including Hungary last year for Williams. but made a career move which he did not want to make by having to go to Ligier for 1991 after he'd been fired by Williams. And he's now been lapped by both the leaders, and you can see them. Ayrton Senna, the winner of 27 Grand Prix, his 27th at Phoenix, to equal Jackie Stewart's record. Only one driver has won more Grand Prix than Stewart and Senna now, and that of course is Alain Prost, who's won 44. We are on lap 23, and behind Nigel Mansell it is still Riccardo Patrese. So both the Williams in the top three. It's still Jean Alesi who is in 4th position, Gerhard Berger 5th, Nelson Piquet 6th. Prost is now up to 7th place, having rejoined after his tyre stop in 11th position. 8th is Gachot, and in 9th position it is Roberto Moreno. In 10th position it is Eric Bernard, and in 11th and 12th places Gianni Morbidelli and Pierluigi Martini in the V12 Ferrari-powered Minardis. That's the first 12. We're on lap 24, there's a long way to go yet. And don't forget that if things go the way the tyre technicians are expecting them to go, both Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell should be in for a tyre stop fairly soon. You can see how close they are. Prost, of course, has made his move, come in for tyres early. Good tactical move. And that gives you a perfect idea of what the 2.7 mile Interlagos circuit near Sao Paulo looks like. And it shows you where Riccardo Patrese, the white dot, is in relation to Mansell. Don't get too excited about the way the yellow and green dots close up and pull away from each other. There's somebody having to follow them on a computer. Now, through they go again. And it's, well, it's half a second now. Nigel Mansell smokes the left tyre as it momentarily stops.
Yeah, just grabbed the left front brake. There's a bit of banking as they turn into that corner, which makes the left-hand side of the car go light. And on the straight, and you can see that the cars are very evenly matched in performance, and with these slow corners, and slow corner onto the main straight, the lead car gets the jump on acceleration, and really overtaking is going to be very difficult indeed in a straight fight, and extremely defendable from Senna's point of view with the powerful Honda V12 behind him. So Mansell, who closes right up in the hairpins, and he keeps doing that every lap, and then as we see when they get out onto the main straight, they go through that uphill left-hander, and at that point Senna gets the power on first. And even when Mansell's very close, he pulls a big lead. Now we're coming under braking now. This is the start of the left-hander onto the main uphill straight past the start-finish line. Senna's got that little bit of space, and Mansell won't get close to him, even as they get up to speed and he starts picking up a toe from the hole in the air made by the McLaren. And Mansell into the pits. Mansell has gone into the pits for tyres. Now, that's interesting. Now, this is vital. The Williams, if they can be really quick, that could put Mansell out in the lead when Senna's made his stop. Now, let's have a look. Bit of trouble with the right front, but not too bad. Go. And Mansell's got a problem with the automatic gearbox by the look of it. And that was a great shame, because it was a super tyre stop by the Williams team, but they've got this new automatic gearbox, and that seemed, I would have to guess, that was a hiccup from the new gearbox.
What an absolute tragedy for Nigel Mansell. He lost at the very least 6 seconds on that stop. If he'd taken 8, which would have been respectable, but instead he took 14. And so that's put him down, and Nigel Mansell has rejoined in 5th position. Race order now then. In the lead, Ayrton Senna. Up into 2nd place goes Riccardo Patrese. To 3rd place goes Gerhard Berger. To 4th position goes Alesi. To 4th position goes Berger. And in 5th place, Nigel Mansell. He's on new tyres, but of course he's got to get past Berger. He's got to get past Alesi. He's got to get past Patrese before he can do anything about Senna, and that puts Senna into a tremendously strong position. And here comes the Brazilian into the pits. Now let's see how his pit stop compares with that of Nigel Mansell. You remember what Nigel Mansell's time was? And so, oh, what an absolute cracker! 7 seconds.
Yes, and Senna got the car moving literally as it landed off the jack, and that was a fantastic stop, fantastic work by the McLaren team, and a brilliant getaway by Senna. He missed a gear on the way out, but that won't hurt him compared with the problems that Mansell had. And Senna now has a very, very big advantage over Mansell, who's obviously his main threat in the race. There are cars between them. And that was extremely good tactics by the McLaren team to come in immediately after Mansell, because it didn't allow Mansell to get any sort of a run on new tyres, get the response in immediately, and that has really established Senna and McLaren in a very comfortable and healthy situation now.
Senna a passar novamente a Hakkinen, que lhe faz sinal. O jovem Mika Hakkinen percebeu bem o esquema da Fórmula 1. Ele que era piloto excessivamente voluntarioso na Fórmula 3, provocando até alguns acidentes espetaculares. O último grande prémio de Macau. Nem mais. Senna volta a ter vários concorrentes atrasados, aqueles que ele já tinha ultrapassado antes. Quando da paragem?
Race leader Ayrton Senna on new tyres after a scintillating 7-second pit stop. And that is Eric Bernard lapping Thierry Boutsen. Eric Bernard in the Lola, and Gerard Larousse will be delighted with that. The Larousse Lola team have got a very severe financial problem. There is a question of whether they're even going to be at the San Marino Grand Prix. They need money desperately. But now there is only 3.2 seconds between Ayrton Senna and Riccardo Patrese. Now this is sensational. Patrese is starting to close on Ayrton Senna, and you're going to see it for yourselves. The incredible Italian in his 210th Grand Prix. There's the confirmation. Mansell up into third place on lap 28.
Yes, well, that's the important one, because remember, Patrese still has to stop for tyres, and Senna has the advantage of fresh rubber, so he'll pull away pretty quickly, one would imagine. And Mansell is also chasing on fresh rubber, so the real race is between Senna and Mansell, and that was all time that Mansell lost in the pit stop to Senna, and one just hopes that the problem was with the actual gearbox, as we watch from Senna's car with traffic ahead of him. But we hope that it wasn't that Mansell, unfamiliar with the operation as he passes Thierry Boutsen, we hope that it wasn't lack of familiarity with the clutch and gearbox system in the cockpit of the Williams that might have meant that it could have been Mansell's error. But whatever it was, I'm sure it was new gearbox symptoms.
Lap 29, and as ever with Mansell, with Patrese in the pits. Fastest we've had so far is Ayrton Senna in 6-7 seconds. Well, Patrese not very much outside that, 7.6 seconds. Stop for tyres on lap 29. Berger into the pits and out of them. And now all the leading runners with Alesi into the pits. You can't see him, but Alesi is in the pits. So that means all the front runners now have got new tyres.
Yes, and as we would suppose, with fresh rubber on, Mansell new fastest lap for Nigel Mansell. And Mansell now second behind Senna, and this is the race to watch. Can Mansell start to chip away at that 8-second gap that he had to Senna when they both had settled down after their pit stop?
Well, Senna, of course, in a tremendously strong position. I've said many times in the past that a lot of dialogue goes on between the drivers in the pits, and there'll be a lot going on between Senna now and his pit team manager, his race engineer, telling him where he is in relation to Nigel Mansell, who is back again into second position, having lost some 6 seconds, which could make all the difference at the end of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Nigel Mansell is 7 seconds now behind Ayrton Senna on this, the 30th lap, We're 5 laps shy of half distance at the present moment. And in the pits there is one of the Ligiers. I can see Michel Teytu, the race engineer, on the left. But out he went. I suspect it was Thierry Boutsen, and you're looking at Riccardo Patrese on new tyres. Now he, like Nigel Mansell and Ayrton Senna, can get the hammer down. 7.2 seconds, remember that. After 29 laps, Nigel Mansell, 7.2 seconds between him and Ayrton Senna. And we'll watch the gap from now on, because this is what the race is all about. Lap 30, Senna leads Mansell by 7 seconds. Mansell is some 20 seconds now ahead of Nelson Pique, who's moved up into the position he finished in at Phoenix. That's 3rd place. 4th position is Riccardo Patrese. 5th and 6th, the 2 Ferraris of Prost and Alesi.
Yes, and Pique, the only one of the leading group not to have stopped the tyres, and of course remember he's on Pirelli tyres, and it may well be that they're going to be able to go right through the race without a stop, so don't necessarily expect Pique to stop. There is Senna. We didn't quite see Mansell hove into sight in the background, but believe me, he's not far out of sight. There's one back marker between them. Mansell will want to find him on a straight to dispatch him without any loss of time in the corners.
Yeah, I was just a bit worried there. I was watching that track very carefully, expecting to see Mansell, and I didn't. Maybe we'll stay on this corner. He's 7.9 seconds behind. Yeah, there he is. There he is. Red 5, Nigel Mansell. I'm delighted that Williams have restored the tradition. Last year, Thierry Boutsen was number 5, and it was a white 5. But this year, it's a red 5, and Nigel Mansell is the man sitting behind it. In 2nd position, coming up to catch Eric Bernard in the Lola with the Brian Hart built Ford DFV engine, and it's a better car than last year's Larousse Lola with the Lamborghini V12 engine, and that is an incredible testimony to Brian Hart, who's really making the old DFR updated engine sing these days. Lap 32.
Yes, well in fact Brian Hart has done a great deal of development work on that engine, and it has been it's nearly all the Hart internals. And Mansell just done a new fastest lap on that one, 1:20.8. So the times are coming down, the fuel load's licensed, and the gap is back down to 7.2 seconds. Problem is that it will tend to yo-yo about during the race now as the leaders negotiate the slower cars. But it looks as if Mansell is putting in his effort now, and now is when he's got to do it. If he's going to catch Senna, he's got to start chipping that lead down right now, because catching him will be rather less than half of the problem of trying to win this race or to beat Senna, because the cars are evenly matched. The circuit is not conducive to passing easily, and it will be a big problem for Mansell, even if he can get on Senna's tail, to actually get past him.
Well, if Nigel Mansell had had a decent pit stop, he would be with Ayrton Senna, because the gap between them now is equivalent to the extra time that Nigel Mansell took to change his 4 wheels and tyres in comparison with Ayrton Senna. So that is how important teamwork and the mechanics getting the old tyres off and the new ones on is in a race. We're on lap 32 now, and you can see that the gap now is under 7 seconds. So Mansell is carving into it. There is Nelson Pique, who is still in 3rd position behind Nigel Mansell and race leader Ayrton Senna. 4th is still Riccardo Patrese. In 5th and 6th positions, it's still the 2 Ferraris, of the disappointing Ferraris, one must say, of Alain Prost and Jean Alesi. I say disappointing because Prost, who was pretty unhappy with the way his car went at the twisty street circuit at Phoenix, said, "I'm looking forward to Brazil because the faster, more open, swinging circuit there will suit the Ferrari better than Phoenix." Well, if 5th and 6th is his idea of suiting, I'm sure he won't be too pleased at the present moment. But in 7th position now, it's Gerhard Berger after his tyre stop. In 8th place, it is Roberto Moreno. In 9th position, it is Gianni Morbidelli. In 10th place, it is Eric Bernard. In 11th position, it is Eric Comas in the Ligier. And in 12th place, it's Mika Hakkinen. Excellent. Mika Hakkinen in the Lotus, which is a very different Lotus to last year's, but has got the Judd V8 engine in it, which obviously isn't up to the V10 Renault and the V12 Ferrari and Honda engines.
And, well, there we see the gap between Patrese and Pique. Patrese certainly been catching Nelson Piquet. Remember, Patrese's on fresh rubber. Piquet hasn't yet stopped. And he's been catching him at about a second a lap, which is certainly what you'd expect for the difference in performance of fresh rubber. On the other hand, if Piquet can keep on with that sort of performance from his tyres, the extra performance you get with very fresh tyres will soon go away from Patrese's car. And I would guess at this stage that the Pirelli runners are going to try and go right through the race without a stop. So Patrese getting right up behind Nelson Piquet. In the meantime, the gap is back over 7 seconds now up front from Senna to Mansell. But as I've said before, it's yo-yoing about a fair bit. It's inconsistent because of the traffic. Although I think Mansell now, here's Patrese. Is he going to dive inside, or is he going to try and do Piquet on the straight with better traction, which he should have with the fresher tyres? Yes, he has. He's got very good traction out. He'll get him with the benefit of the toe, I would have thought, into turn 1. Interesting comparison between the engines of these two cars, but Patrese is right there. So, Riccardo Patrese moves into 3rd place.
And Nelson Piquet moves down to 4th in the last race we expect of the Benetton B190, because on Wednesday of this week, the new Benetton B191 is being launched in London, and that's the John Barnard designed car, and we're expecting it to be very special indeed. There's going to be a new... That's one of the Brabham Yamahas. I can't see because I can't see the number, whether it's Mark Blundell or Martin Brun. No, it's Eric Bernard. I apologise. Eric Bernard, so that is both, and that's terrible news for poor Gerard Larousse, because it means to say that both his cars are out. Aguri Suzuki didn't even start the race. Eric Bernard is out of it, and the retirements now are many.
Now here's an interesting battle, because rather unexpectedly Nelson Piquet is hanging on to Patrese very well indeed and looking full of fight, as he should be in his home Grand Prix. And there we see yet another fastest lap for Nigel Mansell. So the gap may have moved back a little bit with the traffic, but Mansell's got it back to 6.4 seconds now to Ayrton Senna. So it is, as we keep saying, yo-yoing around, and that's to do with traffic. But the person who seems to be setting the quickest laps on clear ones is Nigel Mansell, and that makes one think that he stands a chance of catching Ayrton Senna slowly, gently over the second half of this race.
Now, I was fumbling for words on the retirements. 9 people are out so far out of the 26 people who started at half distance. It's lap 36 now. And those 9 are Gabriele Tarquini, Aguri Suzuki, Maurizio Gugelmin, Satoru Nakajima, Ivan Capelli, Stefano Modena, Andrea De Cesaris, JJ Leto and Eric Bernard. As through to complete another lap goes Ayrton Senna. Now, are we going to see Nigel Mansell go over the line so that I can give you the gap? And the answer is no, we are not. But Senna has now completed 36 laps, and notwithstanding the fact that Nigel Mansell, it's 6.2 seconds, so Mansell's taken another 10th out of Senna's lead, but that could easily change. Senna won't be unhappy with the lead he's got now. Mansell's got to be going very, very, very hard to cut into that.
Yes, but I think we'll get a look at the genuine situation between the two cars for a couple of laps, because I think we've got a clear road between them and there's nothing much in front of Senna, so they may get 3 or 4 laps now where they're not molested by any traffic, and if that's the case, we will see really if Nigel Mansell is able to close the gap on Ayrton Senna.
We were looking at Gerhard Berger. There he is, James. I must say, as I've said before, I'm very disappointed with Gerhard Berger this season. I was disappointed with him last season. He seems to me to be completely outpsyched by Ayrton Senna. I mean, it's significant that Ayrton Senna is commandingly leading this race, and in an identical car, the best Berger can do at the moment is 7th place.
Yes, but one thing we don't know is how comfortable his feet are, because if he's still got the problems he had in Phoenix, you cannot judge a man's driving until he's properly comfortable. It's just not possible. Now, I don't know whether they managed to get Berger's feet right this weekend, but no, I think Berger's performance last year, although he didn't get the results, he didn't get the finishes he wanted, and that was disappointing. He played a tremendous supporting role for Ayrton Senna, and certainly the McLaren team were very, very happy indeed with the job that he did. And it's a little bit early to say this year, but certainly, and but I mean, we didn't expect Berger to be as quick as Senna, and that he duly hasn't been. He is not, you know, really, he's a top driver, but he's not in the same class as Senna, Prost and Mansell, for example.
And talking of Nigel Mansell, down has come Ayrton Senna's lead to under 6 seconds now, 5.7 to be exact, at the end of lap 37. We're on lap 38 out of 71 now, as we watch Gerhard Berger in 7th position. In front of him, in front of Gerhard Berger, who is 6th, I apologise, because down to 7th position has gone Jean Alesi. 5th place is Alain Prost. 4th is Pique, and Alain Prost is closing on Nelson Pique. Race order from the top. Ayrton Senna, lap 39, leads Nigel Mansell by 4.8 seconds. It's come down from 6.3 to 4.8.
And it's coming down so fast now that one begins to think that possibly there's some problem for Ayrton Senna, because they've had a clear run, and Mansell's pulled a second a lap off him on each of the last 2 laps.
Now, which Ferrari is this? We need to see the driver's helmet, and it's into the pits. Well, we'll soon see, because there'll be an external shot. It's the second time the car has stopped. It's Alain Prost. Alain Prost's second stop. Now, 5.9 seconds. Well, Prost obviously unhappy with his tyres. He stopped on lap 39, and he stopped previously on lap 18. So his tyres have only lasted about 19 laps. Now there is Senna. Where is Mansell? The gap is through now. We're waiting for Senna to come through. Here he is now. Let me see the line, please, Mr. Producer. And the gap was 4.7 seconds. 4.3 seconds. So Mansell is continuing to carve into that lead, and if he goes on the way he is going, there's still enough laps left for him to close up. And now you can see the gap visually. This is lap 40, 71 lap race. Nigel Mansell has really got the bit between his teeth.
Yes, and I don't see another car immediately ahead of Senna, so they're still getting some clear laps. And so far, with the clear laps, Mansell has shown quite a noticeable speed advantage over Ayrton Senna. He's been able to catch him surprisingly quickly. Does this mean that Senna's got a problem? The bugbear of McLaren's last year was gearbox, and that has been, if any weakness they had, their slight weakness, and they had a bit of gearbox trouble, I believe, in Phoenix. And that sort of slowing down by Senna makes one think that maybe he's lost a gear, or he's having a little bit of trouble with the gearbox.
Now, the last thing I would ever accuse the McLaren team of is being smug. but certainly after Phoenix, when their new car had made such a fabulous entrance to Grand Prix racing by blowing everybody into the weeds, they were extremely confident, and Senna said, just wait until Brazil when we've got the car set up properly. Well, Williams seem to be doing even better.
And now the gap just over 3 seconds, 3.2 seconds, one back marker between. It's one of the Ligiers, and when they were lap before, both Ligier drivers behaved extremely well, made space for the leaders, so Mansell will certainly be hoping for that, and we reckon that is Boutsen, and certainly with his level of experience one would expect him to see the quick men coming and get well out of the way. Now Mansell's got Boutsen right in front of him.
I think I'm willing to be corrected, but it looks to me like Mika Hakkinen in the Lotus. We'll soon see, because Ayrton Senna is on him, and in 5 laps Nigel Mansell has halved the gap. It is Mika Hakkinen that he's catching, and about to lap. Now Ayrton Senna in the V12 Honda-powered McLaren is fairly gobbling up the distance between himself and the youngest man in the race, 22-year-old Mika Hakkinen in only his 2nd Grand Prix. But as they go across the line, now there is Senna, and once again I haven't seen Mansell, but I'll have the gap in just a second. It was at 3.2 seconds. And Senna is closing all the time on Mika Hakkinen. Lap 42, Senna leads, Mansell 2nd, Patrese 3rd. And you can see, there is Nigel Mansell. It's 3.1, or was, but it's now come down. I've got no doubt about that. But if Mika Hakkinen lets Mansell through cleanly, it will have been a big help to the Englishman.
That's right, and well, I don't think Senna's got, if he has got a problem, it's not much of one, because he's now responding to Mansell's challenge. And Mansell will be praying that every slower car he sees him and makes the due arrangements.
Well, that is Nelson Pique that Senna is catching now, and Pique is in 4th position. So Ayrton Senna has lapped everybody up to his Brazilian compatriot, 3 times world champion. That shows you how quickly the McLaren is going. It shows you too how quickly Nigel Mansell is going. Race order lap 42. Ayrton Senna leading Mansell by 3.1 seconds at the end of lap 41. Riccardo Patrese is half a minute behind Mansell in 3rd position. 4th is Pique, who is about to be lapped by race leader Ayrton Senna. 5th is Berger, 6th is Alesi, 7th is Prost, 8th is Roberto Moreno, and the gap now is under 3 seconds. 2.9 seconds between Nigel Mansell's 2nd and Ayrton Senna in the lead. Those are the race numbers at the bottom. 1 is Pique, 5 is Mansell, that is Berger. There's a big crowd here, as you would expect in Brazil, particularly as Sao Paulo is Ayrton Senna's hometown. Pique. There's Berger. And it's Gerhard Berger now, catching Nelson Pique, as into the pits comes Alesi. Now this is very significant. Both the Ferraris have had 2 tyre stops. Jean Alesi came in on lap 29, 6.46 seconds. That is an excellent stop on lap 43, and that's his 2nd stop, and he rejoins in 8th position with Ayrton Senna still leading Mansell, and Patrese 3rd. Pique 4th, being caught by Berger in 5th position. Down to 8th position goes Alesi, and that means up to 6th position comes Alain Prost, ahead of 7th place Roberto Moreno.
Este novo Williams Renault parece carro bem nascido, que aliás as declarações prestadas quer pelo Nigel Mansell, quer pelo próprio Riccardo Patrese, tem satisfeito os pilotos, bom comportamento de chassi e uma melhor resposta neste início de época por parte do motor da Renault. Aliás, os técnicos franceses têm feito um trabalho bastante apurado, têm desenvolvido bastante o seu V10, já há 5 versões, 5 evoluções, digamos assim, do motor original, e cá está outra vez Berger atrás de Nelson Pique.
Estão colados, a diferença era de 3 décimos de segundo na volta anterior, na 43ª.
Mas eu não sei como é que o Nelson consegue manter este ritmo com pneus que já têm em cima 44 voltas.
Bom, eu também é conseguido.
Closing, and here we see from the cockpit of Berger's McLaren, we get a good, tremendous view of the back of Nelson Piquet's car. Oops, strange interference, but there they are from outside. And let's see if Berger, now as they go downhill left-hander, then hard onto the brakes for the slow left-hander onto the main straight, can Berger outpower into McLaren? He's perfectly positioned to get a good run at Piquet up the hill. Let's see if the V12 Honda, combined with the hole in the air that Piquet's making, can carry Berger past him. And it's going to be a fight under braking. Berger's going for the inside, and he's there. He's got the inside. He can now dictate the corner. Classic overtaking manoeuvre, but Piquet's not giving up easily. Berger now you see Berger there, very clever. He let the car run a little bit wide out of the left-hand bit there to push Piquet offline, and that was quite legitimate. Piquet knew it and expected it and tucked in quite happily behind Berger. It was not a position he was going to hold for very long. Remember, he's on old rubber. He just hasn't quite got the traction now, but it would appear that they've made the decision to go through the race on the one set.
Yes, I maligned the unfortunate Nelson Piquet in saying that Senna was coming up to lap him. It was Gerhard Berger who was coming up to pass him, and he's proved it back. And here is a replay of Gerhard Berger with Nelson Piquet fighting on the outside of the corner, hoping to get through on the second part of that corner, which is the right-hand exit. But, as James pointed out, Gerhard Berger blocked the exit and Nelson Piquet had to drop back. 5th position ahead of Alain Prost.
So now up front, Ayrton Senna has got the gap to Mansell to over 4 seconds for the first time for quite a while. And it is bouncing around, courtesy of the traffic. As I said a while back, if Mansell is going to make his mark in this race, or get in a position to fight properly for the lead, he's going to have to get on to Senna's tail in the next next 10 laps, because it'll take him a while to both work out and find a way around Senna at the end of the race. Now, plenty of traffic around. And that's Moreno in front of Ayrton Senna in the second Benetton. Senna gets past him without any delay or any problem, and he's got a few cars between himself and Mansell now, so this is a worrying time for Nigel Mansell.
And Roberto Moreno is in 9th position. You can see Mansell in the background. There's 3 cars between him and Senna, so as James says, this is going to give Ayrton a big advantage. He's lapped everybody up to 8th place now. He's leading on lap 47 by 4.1 seconds now from Nigel Mansell. Patrese is 3rd. Piquet is in 5th position because Gerhard Berger's got ahead of him. And in 6th position, it is Alain Prost. But this is the story. Nigel Mansell that we had a look at there. Now you'll see Senna go across the picture right to left. There he was. And it looks like considerably more than 4.1 seconds now. Senna, as ever, is working the traffic as into the pits at last comes Nelson Piquet. He's had to give up. That's lap 47. And that's a good stop by the Benetton mechanics, as they're not used to making a tyre stop now. 6.8 seconds. That's the third quickest one we've had. The Ferrari mechanics got Prost out in an amazing 5.9. They got Alesi out in 6.4. And the Benetton mechanics have got Pique out in 6.8, which, as I was saying, considering they're not used to tyre stops on account of the fact that Pique and Moreno normally go straight through, is an excellent effort.
Yes, and the result of having all that traffic to pass has meant that Nigel Mansell has now fallen to just on 6 seconds behind Ayrton Senna. Looking ahead, I think he's got a clear road in with which to chase Senna, maybe one car between them. Now Nelson Piquet's tyre stop then really was a tremendous effort by the Benetton team. They turned the car around very quickly, but it was disastrous timing, because that's the worst way to use 2 sets of tyres, unless they put Pique on a very soft compound to try and run him in a sprint to the end of the race. But I doubt whether they do that, and that would be certainly guessing if they did that, because of this all the rain we've had in practice. It's not possible for anybody to really know very accurately how compounds are going to behave. But you see, to get the equal good use out of 2 sets of tyres, you really want to be stopping soon after 1/3 distance in the race, well before half distance, because of course the car is 50% heavier, more than 50% heavier when it starts the race, courtesy of the huge fuel load that they carry, and therefore the tyres get a lot more effort in that first third of the race. So stopping time is soon after 1/3 distance to get equal use of the 2 sets, and Piquet of course was well over half distance, and therefore the second set won't be able to be used as fully as the first.
Lap 49 out of 71, 7.7 seconds is the gap between red 5 there, Nigel Mansell, and race leader Ayrton Senna, who as ever is working the traffic to perfection. This was the way Senna demonstrated his superiority over Alain Prost many times when they were in the McLaren team together, because Senna would dive into gaps in the traffic that the more experienced and older Prost just wouldn't countenance trying to get through. And time after time it served Senna very well. There was time after time it didn't serve him so well, of course, like Hungary last year when he collided with Nannini but then went on, and Brazil last year here at the Interlagos circuit when he hit Nakajima, lost the lead and the race, and finished in 3rd place as a result of it.
Well, Mansell is now dropping back on Senna, and I think it's more than just the traffic, because he's been lapping slower than teammate Riccardo Patrese for the last few laps, which would suggest that he's got a problem, and it may just be that he's overcooked his tyres with the big charge he's been putting in to try and catch Senna. But there is Ayrton Senna, the gap now 8.5 seconds, and clearly Mansell has some sort of a problem. Let's hope for his sake that it's not their new gearbox again. That was the problem in Phoenix in the first race, and with the World Championship at stake, if it's got a gearbox problem, Mansell won't be best pleased. Whoops.
Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi Ferrari, and it looks to me as though he's beached it, by which I mean the very low bottom of the car is riding over the high curb, and that means to say his rear wheels are off the ground. And if he's pushed off or dragged off, what he's getting, he's out of the race now. Pierluigi Martini joins the retirements, because if he has a push start, he is out of the race, and that makes 11 cars and drivers out of the race on this, the 50th lap. Tarquini, Suzuki, Gugelmin, Nakajima, Capelli, Modena, De Cesaris, Leto, Bernard, Mark Blundell, and now Pierluigi Martini, as you look at race leader Ayrton Senna, who is consolidating his advantage over Nigel Mansell, who may have a problem, we don't know for sure, but from the way Senna is pulling away, it's now 8.5 seconds. It looks like it. Into the pits comes Mansell. That was the problem, obviously. Now, how is this going to compare? Nigel Mansell in for his 2nd set of tyres on lap 51. And it's another bodge stop, 9.5 seconds. The mechanic at the front got the jack caught underneath the car as Nigel Mansell accelerated away, but it was better than the first stop, if scant consolation. But Senna's stop was 7 seconds. He's still in 2nd place, Nigel Mansell. Senna's tyre stop on lap 27 was 7 seconds. Mansell's tyre stop the previous lap was 14 seconds, so Senna gained 7 seconds there, and Mansell's just stopped in 9.5, which gave Senna another 2-second advantage. Quite apart from the fact, of course, that Mansell's lost time on the slowing down and speeding up, but he's still in 2nd place. Now, Patrese was 30 seconds behind in third position, so he'll obviously be a lot closer to Nigel Mansell. And now I think Ayrton Senna will have the cushion that he wants. I wonder whether he too will have to come in for a second set of tyres, as Mansell and both the Ferraris have.
Yes, well, Senna now really has the luxury of not having to, because he's got a big enough lead, even if he loses a fair bit of performance in the tyres. And there's Moreno in the pits for his tyre stop, and it would appear that the Pirelli runners have really caught themselves out with too late a decision to change tyres. But Senna will, I'm sure, have the luxury of not having to change tyres, even if his tyres are going off in terms of performance, because Mansell is some 35 seconds adrift. And there it is, 34.8 seconds on the caption, and certainly he's got no chance of catching him, Senna, now, unless Senna has a problem. The bungled first a pit stop from the Williams team, well, not bungled by the team particularly, but whatever problem they had getting away, Mansell didn't seem to be able to get into gear or get the clutch to work as we look from Senna's cockpit. Look at Senna's cockpit. And Senna now, we've had a hard race for the lead for some time, but Mansell, I think it would appear, at least it wasn't the gearbox, shot his second set of tyres in the attempt to catch and challenge Ayrton Senna. Senna was able to take it coolly, look after his tyres and still hold off the challenge, which never really got onto his tail. And less than 20 laps to go now, Mansell will really be driving for second place. But I'm sure second place will please him a lot, get him off the mark for points of the year. And he should be very encouraged by the race performance of the new Williams. It certainly augurs well for the rest of the season, but to beat Senna and the McLaren, they're going to have no hiccups in pit stops, no problems with the gearbox, and everything working very slickly, because Senna and McLaren at the moment seem to be invincible.
Well, the gap has come down from 34.8 to 31.5, as you can see, but that's still a colossal advantage to Senna. And so while we're watching the new McLaren Honda V12 powered MP4/6, let's give some credit to the people responsible for it. First of all, of course, to Ron Dennis, who so capably heads up the whole McLaren International organisation. To Neil Oakley, who, although Ron Dennis will say the car is designed by a team, as it is, and that's one of the Ligiers out, it's Eric Comas out of the race. And as I was saying, although Ron Dennis will say it's a team effort, it is Neil Oakley who leads the team. Credit too to Henri Durand, who left Ferrari to go to McLaren to work on the aerodynamics of the new car, and has done so to such effect that before the season began, Senna jokingly said, I couldn't go to Ferrari, so they've given me one to drive that looks like it, meaning this McLaren, which if you painted it in Ferrari scarlet would look remarkably like the Italian car. But it's better because it's leading. And not only that, but Gerhard Berger is in fourth place, Alain Prost in the leading Ferrari is fifth, his teammate Jean Alesi is sixth. So Ferrari are not covering themselves in glory at the Brazilian Grand Prix, the race where they had expected and hoped to do much better in comparison with the McLaren than they had done at Phoenix.
Yes, well, what looks, to all intents and purposes, a foregone conclusion for Ayrton Senna, who we look at now, the rest of the race. However, rain clouds are looming, and if we get a bit of rain, we may get the race livened up a bit again. It all looks a bit simple for Senna at the front, although he's had to work hard for two-thirds of the race to get that big lead. It was only when Mansell pitted for the second time that he did. But a little bit of rain may just give us an extra ingredient.
Yeah, if we had a lot of rain and the race had to be stopped, it couldn't happen at a better time for Ayrton Senna, because he is now on lap 54, which is the three-quarter distance lap. And if the race has to be stopped after three-quarters distance, the result is declared as it was. So Senna would have won without having to go the full distance, but I'm hypothesising. Ayrton Senna, of course, will be thinking of nothing but his positioning on the track and his speed and his gears and his trajectory and all the other things that a racing driver does think of. But if he was able to luxuriate in some peripheral thinking, he might be thinking, well, maybe this year I'm going to win. He has tried 7 times before. He first drove at Brazil in the Tolman when, of course, it was at the Jacarapagua circuit at Rio de Janeiro. And each of those 7 years he has failed to win. And this, of course, is the race more than any other he wants to win, because the Interlagos circuit is at Sao Paulo, which is Ayrton's home city. He's already just about the most popular man in Brazil. If he wins here today, the crowd's enthusiasm will know absolutely no bounds.
11º, carro número 11. Nelson Pique baixou para 6º lugar, mas só está a 7 segundos.
Nothing can stop Ayrton Senna now. He has a half-minute lead over Nigel Mansell, and although that lead has come down by nearly 5 seconds, Mansell would have to keep going at the speed he's going now and faster in order to catch Senna by lap 71, because it is lap 56 now, and Mansell is not catching the Brazilian fast enough to enable him to get with Senna, never mind get past him. And Senna, of course, if he got Mansell underneath his rear wing, would make it extremely difficult for him to get by.
Yes, well, Mansell's absolutely scything into the lead, but I'm sure Senna's taking it very easy. The gap's now 25.5 seconds, but Senna really has a lot to play with. And we've just had a report from the pits that there was a cut in one of Mansell's rear tyres, and that would suggest that he got a puncture, and one has to think that that is unlucky. So that was unfortunate for Mansell. That's one of those unforeseeable things that you can't defend against. And that would certainly, and that's the McLaren team, and they've got a set of tyres out and ready. But I would have thought that Senna would have come in much sooner after Mansell if he wanted to stop again, because a 25-second lead would only just get him out in the lead if they had a really good stop, and they wouldn't want to come out in second place behind Mansell, who's on relatively fresh rubber. So my guess is that those tyres are for Berger.
We'll see. Lap 57, Senna leads by 25 seconds from Nigel Mansell, second position. In third position, it's Riccardo Patrese. Fourth is Gerhard Berger. Fifth is Prost. Sixth is Pique. And seventh, not yet lapped, is Jean Alesi in the Ferrari.
Having said, I guess that those tyres are for Berger. My hope is that they're for Senna, because that will certainly liven the race up. And one is well capable of getting these things wrong, so we'll wait and see which of the McLarens is coming in. 23.2 seconds the gap ahead of Mansell to Ayrton Senna. So it's coming down, but Senna will know all about this, and I'm sure has plenty of speed up his sleeve to respond if needs be, unless of course he's in tyre trouble. But if he is, and he stops from a 23-second lead, he may well not get out in front of Mansell.
And we're getting one of 2 spots of rain here at Sao Paulo at the Interlagos circuit. But of course the spots of rain will affect the circuit the same for everybody. And Ayrton Senna was fastest on Friday when it was very wet here, when the conditions were almost suicidal. And I remember that Senna's first win ever in the Lotus was in Portugal, when the wet conditions were almost indescribable. So rain won't worry Senna, it won't worry Mansell either. But now, how are they going? At the end of lap 57, Senna has gone across. Nigel Mansell crosses the line now. 14 laps to go. Mansell still in second place. 11 seconds behind him is his teammate Riccardo Patrese. It looks as though both the Williams are going to finish in the points here in Brazil, as opposed to neither of them. And the gap now is 21 seconds. But even if Mansell continues to reduce the gap between himself and Senna by 2 seconds a lap, he would need, well, yes, he could. I'm just working it out in my head as I talk to you. If he keeps on going the way he is now, and Senna does the same thing, it means to say that 3 laps from the end, they will be absolutely together. Well, that is something to savour. Meantime, The traffic could affect the situation. Lap 58, Senna 21 seconds ahead of Mansell second, who is 17 seconds ahead of Patrese, and it was 10. So now the rain is starting to come down very definitely as you watch Jean Alesi in 5th position behind Gerhard Berger, in 6th position behind Gerhard Berger and Alain Prost, and there is Pique flying 6th position after his tyre stop. I think we're going to see a lot of action in the remaining laps.
Yes, the problem is that the rules say that they don't have to come in until the circuit gets really wet, because as it started a dry race, if it rains it will be stopped, or if the track gets really wet the race will be stopped. And certainly Senna has probably been being extra cautious in the conditions. With his big lead he can afford to be, which would have been part of the reason, as the rain was spotting. You see it on your visor first before you can feel it on the track, but that would have made Senna tend to be pretty cautious. Nelson Piquet sliding about a fair bit, so see the car sliding, so it is definitely a little bit slippery.
Well, if there is one man who's got more guts in this situation than most of the rest of them put together, it's Mansell. Mansell will certainly not defer to the conditions, and if he can see a chance of victory, he will be hanging in there. Lap 59, Senna 20 seconds now, Mansell closer, ahead of Mansell in second place. It's still Patrese third, it is still Gerhard Berger fourth, Prost fifth, Pique 6th, Alesi in 7th place, and Alesi is the last man not to have been lapped by Ayrton Senna. In 8th position it is Roberto Moreno, in 9th position it is still Bertrand Gachot in the Jordan, 10th position is Morbidelli, 11th place is Hakkinen, who is going but of course has been lapped, no disgrace to that, and in 12th position is Thierry Boutsen, staggering round in the Ligier, and I imagine not feeling at all happy. It's grossly overweight, and that is Bertrand Gachot, and that is Mansell spinning. Mansell spins, well, that'll give you an indication of how slippery it is. Mansell, he's stopping, Mansell out, oh! For the second time in two races, Nigel Mansell retires in the Williams. Well up at Phoenix and in second place, and this is a replay of course. Now I'm really guessing, I don't know, but I wonder from the way Mansell spun there whether it's a repetition of the problem that Riccardo Patrese had in Phoenix when his semi-automatic gearbox unexpectedly first of all put him into neutral and flung him sideways, and then without any command from him went to second gear.
Yes, the way things were happening with Mansell's car, the gut feeling that I had was the same as that, Murray. It looked like more gearbox trouble. I do hope not, because here we seem to have the Williams team, very much as expected for this year, a real chance for the World Championship, a real threat. Their car is certainly fully competitive, but they cannot take on McLarens if they're going to have niggling problems and lack of reliability. I know it's early days yet, but Mansell went, and there he is. Well, there's a fit man. He's sort of driven 60 laps of Interlagos, and he can still find the energy to run uphill. Mind you, with cars flying about the track, you get a fair bit of motivation for that.
Well, Mansell literally legging it, and what a tragic sight that was, because he had driven a superlative race time after time to reduce the gap between himself and Senna that we're looking at. But it's another indication, with Senna incidentally lapping Mika Hakkinen again, it's another indication of how the McLaren policy to do things one step at a time and not to take any tricky, untoward or forward-looking technical moves before the others has paid off, because McLaren have got a semi-automatic gearbox on the stocks as well, but they've decided to stick with their transverse 6-speed gearbox until they are completely happy with the semi-automatic. Williams had software problems at Phoenix with the computer that controls the hydraulics, which changed the gears, and it may well be, I don't know any more than you do, but it may well be that it's a repetition of that problem. And look at the way Mika Hakkinen is taking a lesson from Ayrton Senna, hanging on to the Brazilian who has just lapped him. Senna in the V12 Honda-powered McLaren and Hakkinen in the V8 Judd-powered Lotus. Well, it may well be that Senna is taking things very easily indeed, knowing that he is now 36 seconds ahead of Riccardo Patrese, who, like Mansell, is closing the gap between himself and Senna. But all the time, Ayrton is having this conversation with his race engineer at the pits. He knows exactly what the score is. He can take things very... well, I don't want to say Senna's in trouble, I don't know, but he certainly is taking things very easily from the way that Mika Hakkinen is hanging on, and that's no discredit to Hakkinen. It's only his second Grand Prix, and he's got the Judd V8 engine, which is frankly not in the same street, nor would John Judd expect it to be, as the V12 Honda, which has had millions and millions of pounds spent on developing it. But Hakkinen hanging on as they come through to complete the lap.
Yes, looking at it, I'm sure all is well with Senna's car. He's not right back on the revs, will cut down the power of the engine, will be taking it very easily, particularly with the track still possibly a little bit treacherous and that little flurry of rain. And there's no reason for him to stick his neck out with a 40-second lead or 35-second lead. His job is purely to finish now and certainly not to be going fast. Hakkinen, of course, extremely talented young Finnish driver, won was British Formula 3 champion last year. There's Mansell doing his crowd waving thing. And Hakkinen, say, won the British Formula 3 championship. He didn't just win it, he won it in dominant style, very much reminiscent of the time that Ayrton Senna won it, some 8 years or so before him. And a man of considerable talent. Lotus team are very excited about him, but of course their problem at the moment is to produce a car worthy of Hakkinen or any other good young driver, and that of course again isn't all the team's fault. They are underfunded, and being underfunded in this business means you don't really have a chance.
Lap 63, and the challenge now is to Gerhard Berger in the second McLaren Honda V12, who is in third place, only 8.5 seconds behind Riccardo Patrese. And it would certainly be very nice indeed for McLaren, again, as they have many times in the Cup past, to have their two cars finished in first and second place. Well, Senna's going to win this race by a country mile, provided he just keeps going. Another crushingly dominant win, as he had in Phoenix. Can Gerhard Berger cut down the gap between himself and Riccardo Patrese second in the remaining Williams Renault and take second place? In fourth position now, it's Alain Prost as we ride with Ayrton Senna. In fifth position is Nelson Piquet. Sixth is Jean Alesi. So both the Ferraris and both the McLarens are in the points. That will help both of them in the Constructors' Championship, but it will mean, as you watch Riccardo Patrese second, that the gap between McLaren and Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship after two races will be even greater than it was after Phoenix. And in seventh position, lapped of course, is Roberto Moreno. Both the Benettons going well. They're reliable, as they have been for a long, long time now. And behind Roberto Moreno in eighth position, Bertrand Gachot. Let's hope he keeps going, because he was in seventh position challenging for sixth at Phoenix, and it certainly would be nice to see the Jordan team having a finish in their second race. Andrea De Cesaris already out, and in ninth position is the Minardi Ferrari of Gianni Morbidelli. Well, that's Riccardo Patrese, and you look at Nelson Piquet, who is in fifth position. So Patrese going extremely well. Williams have yet to have a finish this year, of course. They've had 4 starts and so far 3 retirements, with Mansell and Patrese both out in Phoenix, Mansell out at Brazil. Patrese still running in Brazil in second position on lap 65 out of 71, so he hasn't got to hang on for all that much longer.
Yes, and that's Roberto Moreno in front of him, and he'll want to get past him because Berger is chasing for second place and catching. Pique.
Yes, Nelson Pique ahead of Jean Alesi. We could still have some changes. There is the Ferrari. Now let's see where it is in relation. That's Jean Alesi, who number 28 is in 6th position. And ahead of him is Nelson Pique. So the Sicilian Jean Alesi is challenging the Brazilian Nelson Pique, who once again is going to finish in the points. He finished 3rd in the World Championship last year, his first year for Benetton, after that disastrous couple of seasons with Lotus, when everybody accused him, I think with justification, of having lost his motivation. Now he's got the right car, he's got the motivation back, and he finished 3rd in the championship last year, 1 in Japan, 1 in Australia, and he was, of course, in 3rd position at Phoenix, the first Grand Prix of the year, running in 5th place now, behind Alain Prost, ahead of Jean Alesi, and Ayrton Senna, race leader, is on lap 66 with 5 laps to go at the completion of this one. And Riccardo Patrese has reduced the gap to 20 seconds. But I'm not going to get excited about it yet, because to me this just says that Senna, knowing exactly what his speed is in relation to Riccardo Patrese and his lap times are in relation to those of Riccardo, is just making sure that he's going to finish the Brazilian Grand Prix this time. Oh, that is Bertrand Gachot in the closing stages of the Brazilian Grand Prix, just as in Phoenix. Gachot is retiring from 7th place, and poor Eddie Jordan, who was in Japan just before the Brazilian Grand Prix to try and drum up more sponsorship for his team, will be bitterly disappointed with every justification. I'm very, very sorry, because this is the best turned out new Grand Prix team we've seen for a long time, and it's only 14 seconds now between Riccardo Patrese and Senna. Well, I say again, Senna is a supreme tactician. This is his 112th Grand Prix, of which he has won 27, to give him 405 points in the World Championship so far. But he certainly is cutting things pretty fine if he goes on for the rest of the race as he is now. He's tiptoeing his way round this bend. It looks a lot slower when you're looking at your television monitor through the camera on his car than it does if you're sitting in the cockpit, I'm quite sure of that. But he's on his 67th lap now, with Riccardo Patrese catching him very noticeably.
Yes, I rather got the impression that Senna was going even more slowly than ordinary circumspection would take one. Maybe, I don't know, we'll watch carefully, but I thought he may have a little bit of a problem. He was certainly taking the corners very slowly indeed. Yes, he does sound a bit peculiar. The car's not sounding fully healthy. He's certainly not using all the engine revs, and the gap down to 9.6, and it looks as if Senna is in a bit of trouble.
My goodness, is Senna going to be cheated of victory in the Brazilian Grand Prix for the 8th time by Riccardo Patrese, who has reduced that lead from 40 seconds to 9.6 seconds with 3 laps to go at the end of the one that they are on now. The Honda V12 engine won its first race. That was a terrific achievement. It looked as though he was going to win its second, but soon I think we're going to see Riccardo Patrese in the same shot as Ayrton Senna, who you can see visually is going slower. Absolutely no doubt about that at all. 9.6 seconds was the gap, and we'll see what it is at the end of this lap. If we don't see, that's not Riccardo Patrese there, but we soon will see the Williams, and Senna is coming through to complete now his 68th lap.
Yeah, well, I think Senna may have a serious gearbox problem and not be able to get the low gears. He seemed to be going through the left-hander onto the straight in a much higher gear than he would normally do, and with no acceleration. So maybe he's lost the low gears, and that is Patrese into sight, and he isn't that far away. And the gap is down to 5.4, and I'm sure it's the low gears, second and maybe third, that Senna has lost. I certainly get the impression, and that would be McLaren's bugbear of the last 18 months or so, is their gearbox. And I don't think Senna can get round these slow hairpins properly, because he's having to take them in maybe fourth gear.
Lap 69, and Patrese surges past Mika Hakkinen. 5.4 seconds was the gap as they went into their 69th lap in this 71-lap race. Ayrton Senna is in danger of losing the Brazilian Grand Prix for the 8th time in his career. The race he wanted to win more than all others. And the amazing Riccardo Patrese, the man who's driven in more Grand Prix than anyone else, this is his 210th, of which he has won 3, is seeing the possibility and hearing over his headphones the possibility of making this his 4th and denying Ayrton Senna that victory. Well, 5.4 seconds was the gap. I said we were going to see them both in the same shot. There is Senna, there is Patrese, and they're coming through to complete the lap. That is the end of lap 69. This is the last lap but one. 4.1 seconds, but Senna can do it.
And that oil flag hung out then makes them think it's raining again. And if we've got a little bit of rain coming down to just to add to it. But, no, and Senna, yes, that you see, he's definitely got a gearbox problem. He can't get the lower gears. Patrese reeling him in all the time.
And just imagine the tension in Ayrton Senna's head, in his cockpit. This is it. He's on the last lap but one of the Brazilian Grand Prix. The Brazilian hero, Ayrton Senna, has got Riccardo Patrese bearing down on his McLaren Honda, gaining all the time. The last lap coming up, you can see Senna is going slower. I hope we're soon going to get an exterior shot, because while it's nice to know what Senna is seeing, I would rather be seeing Senna and Patrese together. And you can hear that Senna has really got a problem. Here his engine flatting. It's not running clear. It's not running cleanly. Now this is the start of the last lap. Ayrton Senna gets the 1 lap to go signal. The crowd is, of course, absolutely beside itself with worry and excitement, and the gap is down to 3.6 seconds. I don't see, frankly, how Riccardo Patrese, it's pouring with rain now. I look through and I see Senna waving. Look at him, he's saying, stop the race, stop the race. But it's too late, Ayrton, you're on the last lap. You can lose this race.
Yes, that was a replay of Senna going past the start-finish line to start that last lap. Now we're back in the car in the infield. We need to look in his mirror to see if we can see Patrese coming back. Unfortunately, all we can see is Ayrton's helmet in that. And I think the rain may have freaked Patrese out. In fact, Patrese, whoops, there he was. I couldn't see him in the background, but he hasn't gained at all. And Senna tiptoeing, stuck in a high gear, I think. But the rain is coming down so hard, and that has really worked against Riccardo Patrese. And it does also mean if the race is stopped, it's stopped 1 lap retrospectively, and so Senna would already have won if it's stopped because of rain, because it's when the lead across the line the previous time. And here comes Ayrton Senna for a fine win.
Yes, Ayrton Senna achieves his ambition to win the Brazilian Grand Prix, but another lap or two and I think he would not have done so. But ifs don't matter. Senna has won. Vencedor, winner, Ayrton Senna in Brazil for on his 8th effort. And you can... I'm wondering there if those screams of excitement we were hearing for a moment were Ayrton Senna, because he must be absolutely overjoyed. This is what he's been working for all his career, and he's now achieved it. Number 1, Ayrton Senna has won in Brazil, but a very, very lucky man. Never mind, The object of the exercise is to get the car home. If it completely disintegrates after crossing the line first, it doesn't matter. But Senna has won by 2.9 seconds the Brazilian Grand Prix of 1991, with Riccardo Patrese a superb second. The second McLaren, that of Gerhard Berger, finishes in third position. In fourth position, Alain Prost. Fifth is Nelson Piquet. Sixth, the last man to be unlapped, was Jean Alesi. So both the McLarens and both the Ferraris have finished, together with one of the Williams and one of the Benettons. And you can see how happy Brazil is, and there will be a big party in Sao Paulo tonight.
He has 20 points, and that's 11 more points than Alain Prost. Ayrton Senna the winner, Riccardo Patrese in second place, Berger third.
I think the car is out of petrol. They've done is just pushed it down that hill. When he gets round this corner, there's a bit of an uphill climb, so I imagine Ayrton Senna is going to be picked up from his car and taken back in a pace car, in one of the course cars. I think he is out of petrol. Once again, John Watson absolutely double guesses every...
É a impressão do piloto brasileiro que pela primeira vez consegue vencer um grande prémio no seu país, e perante os aplausos destes milhares e milhares, na sua maioria brasileiros, naturalmente, que não deixaram de licitar desde o primeiro dia de treinos até hoje. O carro de Ayrton vai ser rebocado. Era a vitória que faltava a Ayrton Senna, o Grande Prémio do Brasil. Foi pena, de facto, esta fortíssima chuvada em final de Grande Prémio, em final de festa, estraga um pouco a festa. Um comando consolidado no Mundial com 20 pontos, portanto uma vantagem de 11 pontos sobre Alain Prost, mas estamos apenas no início do campeonato. Esta é a segunda corrida do Mundial de Fórmula 1. Nada está definido, mas há indicações importantes em termos de competitividade dos vários carros. Até há surpresas, Adriano. Bom, enquanto que não vamos ter para já a cerimónia do pódio, a cerimónia de consagração aos três primeiros classificados, Senna vencedor, Patrese o segundo, Berger o terceiro, vamos de novo até Lisboa para o último bloco publicitário desta transmissão direta aqui do canal 2 da RTP. Voltaremos dentro de instantes. Até já!
Iemand heeft de helm van Senna bemachtigd. Steekt hij triomfantelijk in de hoogte. Braziliaanse vlaggen. En Senna zit nog altijd in zijn wagen. En lijdt pijn, zo te zien krampen, vermoedelijk. Wordt daar afgeschermd. Is helemaal uitgeput en lijdt pijn, dat is duidelijk aan zijn gezicht te zien. Zijn dat zijn handen die daar worden gemasseerd of heeft men gewoon zijn handschoenen vast? Heeft hem daar toch bij de handen zit een dokter bij, zo te zien.
In Brazil, at the end of a Brazilian Grand Prix in which Ayrton Senna was victorious. The fans are oblivious and impervious to the downpour. They do not care. Their hero is the winner. But as we look at them celebrating in the stands, Ayrton Senna is slumped in the cockpit of his McLaren Honda. Sid Watkins, the Formula One doctor, is on the scene, and Ayrton Senna looks as if he is completely exhausted.
Yes, in fact, that might have been the reason why we saw Ayrton Senna slowing down. It may not have been a problem with fuel. He is in the car, he is absolutely exhausted, mentally, physically drained. Professor Watkins is there with him, keeping him quiet, keeping him steady, giving him a chance to recover. Obviously, he's put an enormous amount of physical and mental effort into this victory. So really, was it something more than things we were guessing at? Fuel, things that were obvious. Certainly Senna, I've never ever seen him in that condition after a Grand Prix. He is, in my mind, the fittest driver in Grand Prix racing. So therefore, to see him slumped in the car like that, he must have been in some physical discomfort, something that we're not aware of. Now we know that when Mansell went out, the gap that he had over Patrese was something close to 40 seconds. Patrese got that down to just under 3 seconds in the end. It's normal to see Senna back off and really cruise home to the finish, but maybe the guy has really been in serious physical discomfort.
Well, Ayrton Senna, perhaps more than any other driver in Formula One, gives himself totally to his craft. He is mentally committed in a way that others are not. He fought Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese. He has fought the weather. He has fought a falling fuel gauge, which must have been very scary. And he's been fighting physical exhaustion, and still he comes home the winner of the Brazilian Grand Prix.
Yes, it looked like seeing Ayrton get into the car there that he was suffering from cramp. During the course of a race, you sweat a great deal, you lose body fluids, and you lose the minerals in those fluids. And if you get cramp, you're in the car, they've got a seal line drip in the car. That's the medical car that will go out to any incident on the circuit. Ayrton Senna has been brought back in that car, probably nothing more than just dehydration and of course the consequent cramp that follows on, but very uncomfortable to drive under those conditions. And really just, I think, give him about 10 minutes to recover and he'll be up in the press room recounting the true and whole story to the world.
And there is the official result. Ayrton Senna the winner, Riccardo Patrese second, Gerhard Berger third, Alain Prost fourth, Nelson Piquet fifth, and Jean Alesi in sixth place. The helicopter hovering over the circuit as Ayrton Senna is driven round, and that car still must go in the approved direction, although it would have been quicker to return. And there's the championship positions. Ayrton Senna with 20, Alain Prost 9, Patrese 6 with Piquet 6, Berger 4 and Modena 3, and Ayrton Senna has already opened out a considerable lead in this all-important points race this year.
Well, you might call that a dream start to the 1991 season for Ayrton Senna, but let's not forget what the McLaren team have done. This is a brand new car, it's a brand new engine from Honda, and really these victories, although Senna is the man, because he is the pilot, he's the driver, he gets the kudos, but one must not forget that what McLaren do is nonetheless remarkable.
Yes, it's a point of speculation, isn't it, as to whether anybody else could do the same. There's the constructors' points table. McLaren Honda streaking into the lead with 24 points over Ferrari's second place 10. Williams Renault 6 points. Not enough really for the way they've shown up. You'd have expected after such a good position in so many races for them to look better.
Well, I think they are going to look better. I think by the time we get to Europe, Williams will have had an opportunity to do a lot more testing with the car and with that new gearbox they have. And of course, by the time we get to Europe, the position, the competitiveness amongst those top four teams, and I include in that the Benetton, who will have a brand new car for Imola, is going to be pretty impressive. And Imola is a racetrack, one of my personal favourites. It's always an exciting race there, a fantastic atmosphere. So 1991 looks like being a real vintage year in Grand Prix racing.
We expect the Italian fans to be as enthusiastic about their motor racing as the Brazilians are. We said perhaps done them an injustice, or I have, because they have been very partisan in their support of Ayrton Senna, but yet they did applaud Nigel Mansell when he walked back to the pits. It was a fine challenge for the lead.
Well, Mansell's going to be a winner this year at some stage, as are Williams. And don't discount Riccardo Patrese, because Riccardo Patrese has responded enormously to the involvement of Nigel Mansell in the Williams team.
Well, it's been the story of McLaren and Williams and perhaps Ferrari over the past two races. Ferrari will be racing on home territory on April the 28th in the San Marino Grand Prix. That's enough Italian for them to feel at home. Perhaps that is where they will reverse that situation. Don't forget to join us on Eurosport for that. A brilliant Brazilian Grand Prix, John. We have both enjoyed it. I'm sure that when he recovers, Ayrton Senna will have enjoyed it as well. But from us here in Brazil, it's a goodbye.